record. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Heal the Unicorn podcast today. And today's topic is a good one. We don't know where it's going to lead us, so it might be really interesting. But we will be talking about the inner voice, the inner critic, the gremlin, what I have been taught at from IPAC, that voice that tells you that you're not good enough, that you can't do it, that you need to slow down and take it easy. That voice, when we hear that voice, how we can identify it is we start to feel bad, down, sad, irritated, annoyed, frustrated. Any of the feelings and emotions that fall under the bad umbrella is often the voice of the gremlin, right? And then sometimes it can be the ego that talks to us, and then the gremlin responds. So it's kind of going through us, and we're like cut in the middle of the conversation between these two voices that are, both of their job is to fight for us, right? And to make sure that we are safe. That's the gremlin protecting, and that we win, which is the ego. Because the ego typically comes with an agenda that it wants to win. It wants to succeed. So, Bethany, I know you're taking notes. So what came up for you?
For me, I just really with this talk with the ego gremlin, I noticed for me what helps is to have a balance between them all and to remind them of their jobs. So for me, like my gremlins or inner critic's job is to show understanding, to show love, compassion, and then for my ego, that job is for self-love and my creative side, and then as well as understanding and compassion as well. And when I have those moments of like when my gremlin, her name is Gretchen, and then ego, that's name is Ophelia. So I name them because it's easier for me to be like, okay, Gretchen, let's remember your job. Thank you for doing what you think is going to protect me and keep me safe. But we have a new job, and I remind them. And same thing with my ego, having that name for it just helps me nip it in the butt, kind of be like, all right, like. And it's like when you're getting called out yourself, like when someone's like, Bethany, like do this, it's like, oh, what? Okay. And it brings that attention. So then it's easier to work through, and we get back on that unity and just being one with each other instead of being separate or being scared or being too, I guess, egotistical, where it's all about me, like I'm better than you, type stuff. And that's where like being understanding comes in. And my son's having a blast in the other room. So
that's good. That means he's getting good energy from this conversation, right? He's listening, he's learning himself as well, whether he's right next to you or in the next room. All it takes is, a little whisper. I think Meagan is trying to call.
Oh, nice.
He doesn't have the link.
Oh, how exciting. We're gonna have Meagan with us today. But yeah, for the gremlin and ego, that's I might have to remind my son, that's inside voice, but he's singing. But it's really just that unity. That's really what comes up, and like reframing it to get away from, because that past self will come and try to keep you safe, in other words. And when you're reminding it, hey, this is the job, it's just freeing. That's, yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't have the Zoom link, so she asked for it, and I'm going to send it to her so she can join us.
Oh, sure. Yay.
Where is my Zoom? So in case anybody is curious of how that would work, is on Zoom, you have a button to go, it says a participants. So, and then you can click on invite at the very bottom and you can copy the link and send that link anywhere you want. So that's exactly what I'm doing. And let's close this one. There we go. Sent. So she should be joining us any minute now. Perfect. Okay, so what came to mind for me when you were talking about the, the gremlin, the inner critic, there she is. Let's welcome her, and then we'll continue talking about it, so that way she can get filled in on what we've been talking about.
Yes. Hi, Meagan. Nice to see your beautiful face.
I know, I've been I'm looking in all of our messages. I'm like, I cannot find this freaking link at all.
It's probably in your Google Calendar.
Dude, I looked everywhere. I looked on Zoom. It was just like, no, you're not getting into this meeting. I'm like, okay then.
Well, now you have the link and you can save it.
If I'm smart enough to do that.
So Bethany and I, we started talking about the gremlin, the inner critic voice, and the ego, and then the higher coaches in there as well. And where basically what Bethany was talking about is naming them, giving names to each and every one of them, so that way she can actually have a conversation with them. And when she was sharing that, that's what I was going to before. I'm like, I see the calls and the messages. Thank you for getting my attention, because the message alone is usually not going to do the trick. No. Because everything is on silent. So that way I'm fully here for everyone. That's what I was doing my call. So anyways, what I was talking about is, I think, look, would it help to look at the ego, at the gremlin, the inner voice? They are a little bit different, but they are pretty much the same. And the higher coach as children. If they were children who were concerned for the well-being of their parent, because their job, all of them, is to keep me safe, to keep ourselves safe, and protect from potential dangers. Like a child would, if a child knows if you step in front of a car, and a parent for a second forgot that, the child would remind the parent, like, this is what can happen. So in that case, would it help to see these entities within ourselves, so to speak, as children? And how would we talk to these children?
That's interesting, because when you were explaining it, I did the opposite. So I'm like, to me, it sounds like they're parents, right? Because parents are trying to control us, trying to always look out for our safety, trying to tell you what to do, how to do it, and everything, where kids are more free, right? They look at stuff and find a creative maybe solution, or, do things in a different way. So I feel like, and parents, I feel like, need to come back and say, oh, my kids actually have it right. I need to bring out my child inside of me, because they're not so fearful of everything. They're not trying to protect all the time and all this stuff, where we are, right, as parents. I mean, I'm not a parent, but have what I have seen. Right?
Is that consciousness comes to mind, like wisdom and consciousness, because that is something that we get with age. And wisdom is the best way to explain it, is just a sense of knowing. Like, I'll give you an example. Today I had a call with my client, and one of the phrases came to mind that I don't think I've ever heard of before, but that's what happens for me in the coaching sessions, because I'm tuned in with the person, and when I'm listening to them explain something or say something, like a repetitive phrase will come up. So what came up was life loves persistence. And something like that is quite hard to explain in words for people who are highly conscious, because, or sorry, for people that are very wise and have a lot of wisdom, and they understand wisdom, because wisdom is just a sense of knowing without necessarily having the ability to explain how you know what it is that you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for me, this is something that a parent would have and a child would not. So that,
I don't always say that though, because I believe that every person is different. So I do believe that, you know, some kids are born with a lot of wisdom. They are very intuitive. And so I wouldn't just categorize like adults have more, because I know 80-year-olds who have no effing wisdom and nothing and haven't learned from life, right? Because our souls are different ages. So a 10-year-old could be an 100-year-old soul, but we have an 80-year-old who's maybe like a 2-year-old soul. So I wouldn't categorize it by people's ages. I would definitely say it is an individual, because I know a lot of kids that when they talk to me, I'm like, dude, where did this wisdom come from? Where did this come from? So I think maybe it's like more of connecting, right? Our like connecting with our intuition, and which I believe is also our soul and like our past lives trying to kind of come in here and tell us, you know, what's right and what's wrong. But it's like, are we in touch with it? Are we listening to it? Are we externalizing everything? Or are we listening from within? Right? Because I also feel like with the gremlin and the ego, they are outside of us. They are not quite us, right? It's something outside of us that somehow we allow to overtake our body, just like feelings and emotions,
I think
right?
it might be from other people's expectations. When we have very high expectations put on us, it kind of feeds the ego. Oh yeah, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. But the question we're not asking is, do I want to do it or do I not? And quite often we do say we want to do it, but the next question to ask, do I want to do it for myself or is this for somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And the last question is, how is that benefiting me? But for most people, we don't ask those questions. And whenever there's an expectation that we feel somebody's putting in us or somebody is actually putting in us, it does give, it's almost like it gives language to the ego sometimes. That's one way of how we get it, because ego is, it's kind of like the same thing as a gremlin. Over the years, it picks up on language and experiences throughout our life, and also our interpretations and our assumptions of experiences. And then that it becomes the voice of the ego. And that's what all of us have, a very different voice of the ego, and we have a different voice of the gremlin. Yes, they may be similar because we all have the same categories of life that we all live in and have, right? Family, house, fun and enjoyment, like personal development, job or career, hobbies and stuff like that. Like we all have these things. And based on everything, the voices are created, but they still go back to the same, I guess, life categories that we're all living in, right? And it is important to talk to them, whether we see them as a child, because sometimes the voice comes across and it feels very, very childlike, and sometimes it feels very, like very mature, because it's like what you're saying is valid. You're not lying to me, right? Whereas sometimes that voice is actually lying because it's causing us to doubt ourselves when we shouldn't be doubting. So that's where I guess the gremlin's voice comes in different levels. And then if we don't because all that voice wants is to be accepted, like the rest of us. So it doesn't matter the gender, doesn't matter the age, all it wants to be is accepted, just like every human being, no matter what age they are. And how does one do that? Right? Because everybody wants the button where we push and it's gone and we never have to deal with it. So how would you ladies go about doing that?
I'm sorry, I'm a little sleep deprived right now. I don't understand what your question to me is.
Is it too early in the morning? What
A
time
little
is
bit.
it? 10?
It's 11.
11. Oh, that's not that early. But then again, depends what time you went to bed.
Yeah, I haven't been the last 2 days. I've been having rough sleep. Like I've not been sleeping at all. So the last 2 days, I'm literally running on fumes right now.
Why?
I came out to my mom's. I think it might be the bed's way too soft for me. I asked them to take, there's like a topper on it. So I was like, can you guys take that off? Because I think that might be, and the dogs, they like to sleep with me. So last night, they wouldn't leave me alone. I'm like, please. I had to shut my door. I'm like, no, you guys aren't allowed in here.
But they're like babies.
You know? First, sorry, Bethany, I love being able to see all your tattoos. They're so awesome.
Yeah, I told
Thank you. Yeah, I got gifted because Brian got a new tablet. So he gave me his old tablet. So I actually have like, hey, you can see clearly now. You know, you can see me clearly. So upgrades in the making.
I like it. Okay, what was your question?
I was waiting for it. Oh, now we all got the giggles. So my question was that voice, the voices when they come up. Let's talk about the ego first, because the ego wants to go first. So let's feed it a little bit. First of all, how do you identify when the ego has shown up?
Ooh, that's a good one. For me, so in college, I read Eckhart Tolle Hart's The Power of Now, and that whole book is just about the ego, and that really helped me to navigate what the ego was. And literally, it's looking at it as, well, it's the drama part of me. It likes conflict. It likes when I'm in distress. It likes when I'm sad, and all of those things. So for me, anytime that I'm in that situation or like drama's coming or anything, I'm like, okay, how am I going to react? Am I going to let my ego react? Who's going to propel me into more drama and more conflict? Or am I just going to take a deep breath and be like, okay, I don't need to give this reaction. I don't need to, like, I can acknowledge what's happening, but I don't need to feed into it, which my ego wants me to feed into it because it wants to stir the pot. And I'm just like, I don't want to stir the pot anymore. Like I'm choosing for me to be the one to react to these situations or not react at all to these situations instead of letting the ego react to every single thing that is said to me or that I see, or maybe someone doesn't have the same ideas as me. So just like over there, sit down.
I love that. And then for me, so I have a different relationship with my ego. I know that there's a good side to there's a good part to the ego, and then there's that negative side to the ego. So for me, when I notice that like my ego arises in the good way, I know that there's a lot of creativity. I have a lot of self-love. Because that's where all that stuff kind of originates as well. And then for me, when it's like the negative side, it's when I start to get more impatient, when anger starts to rise, when I start to feel like that, oh, it's all about me. Like, and like you're saying, Meagan, like, it's good to choose between, so I reason with it. I talk to Ophelia, that's my ego, and I kind of just let her know, hey, these are your jobs. Like when that negative side starts to arise, like this is your job. It's your job is to have understanding, compassion, self-love, love for others as well, and to just be creative and go after your creative side, but also have unity, because that's where I really feel like has been the best things, when there's that balance between everything, like myself, the ego, and the gremlin. That's when it's all like, oh, yeah, it's hard to put that into words, but when you just feel more at peace and like balanced, I guess.
When everybody is fed and doing well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it sounds like, yeah. And thank you for sharing, ladies. Yeah. Like those are some very, very powerful ways to identify how the ego comes up, right? And we can either feed into it or not, right? Those are the two options. And then if we feed into it, how do we want to go about it? And then if we don't feed into it,
you're breaking out.
Am I? Am I breaking out? Breaking up or breaking out?
Yeah.
Okay,
both.
That helps. Maybe because the dog was coming down the stairs and she now lay down here in her bed. So what I was saying is that if we go with the decision of not feeding the ego, then explaining to her or him why, which also is like educating it a little bit, which reminds ourselves of why we chose that choice, why we've chosen it, right? For me, when the ego comes up, and also because the ego resides in level 1 and level 2 energy, right, which is the victim and the fighter. Level 2 is also anger. And for quite some time, I've been wanting to completely get rid of anger from my life. And I recently learned that I can use it the way that I want to use it, right? That I don't have to completely get rid of it. So for me, when my ego comes up, especially from like level 2, is I start to feel like that sense of self-righteousness, conflict. That one is huge, right? I want to feel that conflict. And whether I want to do something about it or not, that's also the option. And when I feel the need for justice, right? Whether it's for myself or for somebody else, because ego is not just all about ourselves as well. Sometimes it comes up for others, right? The same thing with the gremlin. Sometimes the voice of a gremlin comes up from the other person as well. And it's kind of like trying to explain what that person is about. And they desire to want to win. When I find myself like, I haven't found myself in a situation for quite some time now, but if I'm having a conversation with someone and I don't particularly agree, I used to want to get them to understand, which is a form of winning. And once I realized that that is also the ego, and the ego, that's one way that the ego and level 2 anger wants to win. You win and I lose. And I've learned that I don't have to go all the way, that I can be halfway, where I don't have to make sure that you understand, because that's the ego as well, wants to explain away as to why I'm right and you're wrong. But we can just say what we want to say and then walk away.
Interesting that you say that, because for me, I do the opposite. Like, I don't care for people to understand my point, because, okay, about veganism, right? A lot of people ask me.
Yeah.
And I can tell when people's ego has come out, and I just end the conversation, because you're not in that frame of mind. You're going to just argue with me. And I don't want to argue with you, because it's not that I'm right and you are wrong. I just have done a lot of research. And if you don't want to hear it, I'm not going to waste my breath on you. Like, I'm not going to have I'm not going to sit here and try to defend myself because I know the truth for myself. And if you don't want to hear it, I'm not going to share it with you. So I've just learned that, like, picking up on when people want to make things into an argument. And it's like, no, I'm here to have a discussion. If you want to have a discussion with me where neither party is right or wrong, we're just sharing our ideas and our understanding of things, great. I love those conversations. But if you even feel like you must win and get really aggressive with me, then I'm just going to be like, all right, well, this conversation is over. Thanks. And I'm going to go. I just, like, I don't give my energy to it anymore for why. Yeah.
But you weren't born with that, right? How did you used to, like, you were you born dealing with conflict in that way? Because that's a conflict. So you learned it.
I feel that, definitely growing up, I don't know if I was quite a conflict person, but I mean, I guess I was. I wanted myself to be the winner at all times.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time, especially when I first, it's funny because I've actually met some new vegans who, like, have just turned vegan. Not you, Bethany, someone else. And it was funny because at talking to them, they were so angry about, like, everything and, like, oh, everyone must be this way and da, da, da. And I'm like, wow, I used to be there. And now I just, like, I will share my wisdom and I'll tell you what I found. But like Bethany said, there's a balance in life, right? So we do need people to eat meat. We do need people that are not eating meat. Right now in the world, however, we all do need to shift over because we've been way too far on this side of everything that we need to now kind of counteract it, and then we can find that balance within. But yeah, so I feel that, like, teaching myself all of these things, like learning about the ego and just really making that choice, right? Making a choice to stay happy, to not let someone get to me. And we all have different beliefs. We all have different opinions, perspectives, everything. So I'm not going to try and convince you to walk in my shoes and have the same perspective as me because you're never going to. So it's like stopping convincing people to be like me because you ain't. I'm the only Meagan.
Exactly. You can take that pedestal because that one is made just for Meagan, and we all have our own.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody can do a better you than you can.
I love that. That was awesome.
And another thing with the ego, that is your unique self. That's where your ego is too. So that's another positive side of, like, ego is your uniqueness. And like you said, it's only one you. And exactly, there's only one me, only one Yana, only one you, Meagan. And that's how it should be. And it's, so yeah, I don't know. That came up.
For me, I separate that entity as more of the true self.
I guess.
Wait, what is your true self? Your ego?
No, the way that I see my true self is, who am I if I didn't have the ego? I didn't have the gremlin. I didn't have the higher coach. I didn't have all those things. It was just me. And how would I show up? How would I talk? How would I carry myself? And the way to explain it, when that true self shows up, is when you feel fully connected, fully grounded, and you have a full sense of knowing of everything, and you feel safe and secure. It's almost like you feel peace and bliss and joy, right? For some of us, it happens so rarely that we forget what it's like. But the great thing is the human mind is beautiful. You can really practice meditation, go in there each time, and you will click into it. And you'll be able to recall that memory and use it at will. For others, they've had a lot more of these experiences. And for other people, like, there's different levels and different lengths of times that any one of us have experienced it or is able to experience it, right? But this is when we feel highly creative. We're in a zone, we're in the flow, we're energized, and we feel like we are standing on top of Mount Everest, and we feel very deserving of it. Like, to me, that's the true self. But in order to get to that true self, you got to go through all these little guys that are there supposed to unite and become one with the true self, where there would be no more doubt, no more hesitation, that even if something comes up, you, without hesitation, just boom, I got it, right? With the gremlin, for example, just saying to the gremlin, like when you hear the gremlin's messages, like, so the goal would be is to accept the gremlin and stop judging it. Because when it comes up and we say, okay, is this a good message or is it a bad message? And what can I do with it? And how can I, level 3, use a level 3 on that, rationalizing through. And that's not what the gremlin wants. It doesn't want to be judged. It doesn't want to be labeled. It doesn't want to be rationalized with. It just needs to know that it's accepted and it's heard. So accepting your own gremlin's messages from level 5, which is, you also see an opportunity in that. So when you hear that message, because it takes practice to get there as well, right? But when you hear the gremlin's message, the response can easily be, my gremlin's message is. That's it. Like, it is. That's it. It's there. It is. And then what's the opportunity from this, right? How am I going to use it and move forward and use it? But it takes time to get there. Because what, Meagan, you're explaining how you work through the ego, that's essentially the same way, even though the ego might have a little bit more fight and bite into it. Right? But it takes years of practice. It's not going to happen overnight.
No.
I never promise any kind of button where you can push, like on your hand or somewhere on the side and say, that's it, everything is gone and I am my true self. It ain't gonna happen like that.
Oh.
We want it, but it's not.
Yeah, because everyone wants to externalize everything, right? Someone else is going to help me. Someone else is going to do. No, you must do your own work to get to where you want to be, right? So even when I have a lot of people always ask me like, oh, how are you so happy all the time? How are you? Da, da, da. And I'm like, because first of all, I've worked on it for a really long time and I'm still working on it. It's a daily process. And, some people, they're like, gosh, I never knew how being mindful is a lot of work. I know, right? Like,
Yeah.
but how much more work is it to like allow all this external things like come in and create turmoil within us? Like, isn't it great to just be able to, oh, hey, I'm not going to let that affect me. I'm going to stay present. And there's a lot to it, but it's an everyday thing because thoughts come. But just like, with the gremlin, it's, hey, what is this emotion or feeling telling me? And I'm going to acknowledge it, but then I'm going to allow it to move on. And a lot of people instead just let it stay and become us. And then that's where we have really bad days or get depressed or are always in an anxious state and have anxiety. It's like, well, if you came back here to the present, which it's hard, it's a lot, but there's a lot of things that you can do to help yourself.
Yeah, you can also sit with an emotion that we want, right? With a feeling that we want. I know I wrote something down on one of my notes because I like to take a lot of notes. So I write things down here and there. And I wrote what I wrote down today, and just like a thought that popped into my mind, was that joy only exists in the moment, in the now, but it can be experienced from the past and the future. Which basically means that the time we have is now. right now is the only time. So you get to choose on how you want to spend that time. Do you want to spend that time, this moment right now, here and there, experiencing sadness, overwhelm, anger, frustration, irritation? I can keep naming these negative emotions that, they're not good or bad, and they're not negative, but this is how the majority of us understands them. They are purposeful. But once we learn that they are and recognize where it's coming from and what it's trying to tell us, then we can start utilizing, right? Becoming aware of it all. But for now, something so simple, and yet I know it's not that simple, especially if you're just beginning, but focusing on the emotion that you want, because you do have a choice. Right now is the only moment. So you can choose to feel joy. You can choose to feel happiness. You can choose to feel excitement. You can choose to feel energized, and focus on that. Just for a little bit, just think about how would it feel? Where would you feel it in your body, right? What other emotions might it trigger, right? Attaching it to other emotions that can create, or feelings that might it trigger. What experiences can that bring into your life? So different kind of questions, and questions that can come to mind to you as well in the moment. Answer them and see where that brings you. Because that's where we have our programming here in North America, especially, but mostly it is around the world, is that to focus on the mind and think before anything. Whereas that is not how we were created to be. We were created to listen to our heart and be connected with ourselves, right? This is where God lives, right? In the heart. This is where we feel. This is where memories are stored as well. And we have been reprogrammed to ignore the heart, to not know what to do with it. Even in science, they only started looking at the heart deeper not too long ago, but mainly they've been focused on the mind. And now they realize that, the heart is actually a very, very, very important organ, that there's a lot to it. So
we forget that it's all connected and they're all equally as important to each other.
Everything in our body is connected. And a perfect example of that would be if you probably might be able to go and Google it now, but Google what our human body system would look like if it was a grid. And it would look like a maze upon maze, and so many different things in there, like different lines, everything. And everything is connected. Now, when pharmaceuticals release medicine, right, and we take that medicine, they give us side effects. Those side effects, like I use an example, one of the conversations I had was, it's going to be gross, so prepare yourself. So think of it like this, where if somebody takes a dump, poops in the water, some of it might float to the top and some of it might stay behind, okay, and continue to fester, and it's going to fester from the top too. And what happens is that regardless of where it is, like some of it comes to the top, those are called the symptoms. You see the symptom of what's causing this turmoil in the water, in the body of water. And the one that stays behind is what is not seen. And that is the effects of the whole entire body system when we take any particular medication, right? Because the side effects is what is seen, but every single part of the body is connected, which means it is affected one way or another. Just because we don't see does not mean it's not.
So that's, can I say something? Sorry.
Yes.
So that's really crazy because I just did a podcast with someone who had a guest on hers, and I was listening to it, and it's a doctor. She practices Western medicine, but she went over and learned Eastern medicine, and her whole entire thing was about that, like, but finding that balance. So if someone needs to take a Western pill or something, you know, what Western medicine does is push everything down, right? But in Eastern medicine, it's all about releasing those things. So when you pair them together, they work hand in hand because you're putting it into your body. But then the Western is trying to now release it out of your body. So it's not staying and creating those things that we don't even see is happening inside of our body.
Yeah. And that also is done from and through connection of the heart. Because understanding your body and listening to the heart that knows it all. We've all heard this phrase, right? The heart knows all. The heart does not lie. So why is it we've been taught to kind of stray away from it and be in the mind? Because if people are connected to their heart, they'll intuitively know to just do what is necessary for the body, like an animal, for example. I don't know if any of you have cats, and when cat goes outside to eat grass, typically it's because the tummy is bothering and they need to throw up, right? So they intuitively know to go and do these things. And they're not taught in the books. They're like, you know what I mean? Nobody explains these things to them. The cats, and also the cats, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when I heard this, I'm like, oh, this is actually interesting. Cats do not meow to each other. Cats only meow to human beings. That's it. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Now I lost the train of thought of where I was going. Choo-choo.
You're saying they like intuitively know to go to that grass. Yes. And
right, but because they are connected and grounded with themselves, with their heart, the whole entire system is connected. They're tuned into themselves. Yes, and they tuned into their environment, and they can feel like also, if you read about, for example, cats, when you move into a new house, the first thing that, if you are a cat owner, is suggested to do in many, many traditions is to allow the cat to go inside, because the cat senses the area, the look around, and then usually wherever the cat lays down and finds a spot to sleep, that is the most magnetized spot in the whole house. Why is it that cats and all animals have their own thing, right? Birds migrate, they know where to go, they know what to do. But we are the only ones who are so disoriented and lost and confused in our own environment. What is it that we are doing different? I mean, Zoom. I think all animals do Zoom. I don't know about you, but I've seen a couple of dogs having Zoom conversations, a couple of cats having Zoom conversations. I've seen them. Okay. So I know certain animals do have Zoom conversations. They have that ability. So it's not that. Of course, that was a joke because the animals can do that. But this is the most different things that we human beings are doing, which has caused us to completely disconnect from ourselves, create all these different voices. Animals don't have those voices. They have their intuition, wisdom, some common sense, because not all of them might know what a porcupine might do if they come close. So they get hit once, or they almost get hit. They learn. They don't do it again. That becomes common sense, right? It's not common knowledge. It's common sense. It's what they've learned themselves. So we as humans are the only ones who are so disconnected. And we do have the tools. And I'm pretty sure both of you ladies would agree that the tools are mindfulness practice, which Meagan, you said you've been doing for years. And then there's meditation, exercise, which means moving the body, whether it's an actual exercise or just for a walk or gardening or cleaning the house, nutrition, and rest. Right? And fun and enjoyment in there. So
I agree.
What's coming up for you ladies?
I had a thought. It's kind of, we passed it a while ago, but I wanted to bring it up again. You're talking about how, like, with the true self, when I was saying like uniqueness, and you brought up the true self. For me, so there's one thing I didn't talk about. So I talked about the ego, the gremlin, and then there's your higher self, which is like your wisdom and your intuition. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the true self is your unity of all three of them, because you got to have some ego, you got to have some gremlin, and you have your higher self. So what I wrote down in my notes for me personally, when they all come together, there's wisdom, intuition, there's love, there's your uniqueness, your creativity, your willpower and strength, your understanding, compassion. And that's where your true self lies with all of those things. So I just thought maybe that might be useful for our viewers, or, I don't know, for you guys.
I like that, Bethany.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But can I add, like, I feel that with the gremlin and the ego, that's also where our security comes in and our boundaries, right? Like that's it's huge. Like some people may think it's like negative, but we need to learn what our boundaries are because we really need them. And a lot of people, break down because they don't know how to either let people go out of their life who are toxic or know how to set that boundary with people. And or we're constantly letting people come into our world and shake it up, and we're like, oh, we're not going to talk about it, I'm just going to allow them to speak to me that way or treat me this way. No.
Exactly.
No.
Every time they come up, they're just reminding us of who we are and what is trying to disrupt our environment where we feel safe. Yeah. Based on the knowledge it has.
Yeah.
Right. So most of it is in a subconscious mind that we're not aware of. So sometimes even hearing those messages can be very, very difficult. Sometimes it can take a little while to finally hear them because it's feeling. And that's why I'm saying if we were connected to our heart and we felt that feeling, we'd know what it is because the mind would translate it to us. But because we're disconnected from our heart, from our feelings and emotions, we can't explain what's going on because we're feeling a certain way and we don't have the language for it. That's what it is. We don't have the words to explain what we're feeling. And how can we explain why we're feeling that way if we can't explain what we're feeling? You got to become aware of what it is first. Like, you know what I mean? And the true self. I love what you added, Bethany, or extended on that. That is the true self. The true self cannot exist without the other. This is where all of us become one. And we remember that we are one. We are connected. We are not separate, right? But in order for most people to get there, they need to first separate themselves from it, right? So that's where separation is necessary. It's kind of like a boundary, right? In order for you to live in my house, and for us to live united, you need to learn a few rules. You need to learn a few things. You need to go through school and education. So I'm going to take you through that, right? So that's where they are kind of like outside of us and seen as a different entity. But once something comes up, once they remind us of a certain feeling or emotion, and then we start to work through it and recognize what it is, why it is, okay, so now what, right? And then do something about it. And then also have that conversation back. It doesn't have to be like you sit down and have a conversation, but through you actually working through it is already a conversation. And then that message changes. But guess what? There's going to be another one and another one and another one. And it can go as quickly or slowly as you want it to go. Right? Because growth is uncomfortable, and this is growth. So it all depends on how quickly you want to go through it all, grow through it all. Right? Like, this one's a good one, and then let's plug it in there. Or you might want to run through it, right? But depending whichever way you go, you go at your own pace that you're comfortable with, and making sure that you have enough rest, nutrition, and balance in your whole overall life.
Yeah. And I will say I like that. I'm going to add a little something because like that, right? The universe is going to keep testing you over and over and over and over again until you get it. But guess what? Even when you think that you get it, the universe is going to be like, oh, wait, but I really want to see if you got it. And then you can level up, right? So when we think like, oh, great, I finally learned the lesson in that. But then it's like, okay, we'll see if you did. Let me throw you a little curveball here.
Yeah. That's why that quote that came up for me, or a phrase, I'm not sure if it's a quote. Like I said, I don't think I've ever seen it. Life loves persistence.
Yeah.
Right, the curveballs are going to come at us, and it's really just checking us and see you want it, you sure you still want it, especially when you start to slow down, things start to happen, right? A lot of us might relate to this sentence where why is it that I always get sick when I relax? Why is it always that things start to fall apart when I just relax and I want to take a breath? That's because you said you want it. And if you really said you want it, that would mean that you would want it all the time and not want to relax. So the moment you choose to relax over choosing what you were going after and doing is the moment that you'll have a lot more opportunities coming to you to remind you that you actually want it or help you choose that you don't. So, and life is going to do that until eventually you get into a certain rhythm where it no longer needs to do that. You find a balance in there, right? Because life is all about balance. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit everywhere, not focus on just one thing. So, and if you persist enough, you keep pushing and going after that, life is going to say, okay, she's good. There's a really interesting, I guess, little story that, what's his name? Brown. I can't remember his first name. I used to listen to him all the time. And he would say that in life, he would push and push and push and push and persist and go after what he wants. And he would constantly be almost like cut at the shins or at the knees where life keeps bringing me down and you keep persisting. And the way that life works, it says, oh, wow, he's persistent. So let's leave him alone. Let's go screw with somebody else. Right? Because that's kind of like how it feels. It's like everything's good. I want to relax and take a breather. And then it's like, boom, are you sure?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, lovely ladies, I need to get off, but I'm so glad I got to see both of you.
Oh yeah.
And I will be able to come next week as well. So I'm done with my subbing. So you'll see a lot more of my face.
Oh yay. Yay. Nice. That's awesome.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, ladies. I'll see you later.
Okay. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. I was gonna say we should wrap up anyways, and since she was going, I'm like, oh, let's just say bye and we'll wrap up quickly. For just a question of what came up for you, like throughout the whole conversation today, what stood out to you the most? Yeah.
He was doing this really high pitched squeal that I didn't necessarily want on the recording. Yeah, so I was like, hold on, well, honestly, what came up for me was really just the thought of, well, when you brought up the true self. And then it came to me like, well, the true self is the unity of everything, of your higher self, your higher coach and that gremlin and the ego. And I liked how you said, like, at first, yes, you got to separate them because you do, but I had to separate my ego and my gremlin before I could bring them all together. Because it was like, okay, hold on, time out. You got to go have a timeout and we'll deal with you. But we got to deal with this one first. And it's like, putting the pieces together like a puzzle, I guess. And then once you get that puzzle together, it's that true self that comes out. And like, I like how you said with the persistency and commitment and consistency came up for me. But it's like, keep going at it because the universe is going to throw you those curveballs. But it's how you respond to them and you work through them that shows your growth and shows you where you could grow more and where you could learn more and, and put you in check also.
Yeah. You can choose to react, respond, and those are different.
Yeah.
One causes pain and suffering, and the other one doesn't.
Exactly.
That's like the black and white version of them, right? So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Like that is a beautiful addition and a beautiful way to kind of like wrap everything up and end with the beautiful vision for everyone at the end, right? That all of us can get there where all of our parts of ourselves reunite. For some people, it takes I mean, I haven't met anyone who it takes a couple of days, but I would say a couple of months. And for some people, it's a couple of years, and for some people, it might be a little bit more. But for the most part, it does come down to how fast do you want to work through it all, which also means that when we feel cracked open, when things come out, to give ourselves the time to heal and recover, because it's a wound that has been reopened that we cannot physically see, but it is there. So it's important to allow the time for that healing to take place. It's like a muscle, right? If you've torn a muscle, you got to let it heal. If you don't, you're only going to do more damage. So the same thing here. And don't try to push it to, this is where you can't necessarily set a goal. That's what I'm saying. Like you can't say that in a year, I'm going to reunite all of my parts and become my true self. That's a beautiful vision. It's a beautiful vision, but it is not a goal, because by doing that, it's expectation, it's pressure. None of that necessarily is going to be very helpful. Most of you already probably know that. So it's important to pay attention and go at your own pace.
Yeah,
right?
Let's take it one day at a time, because we all are, it goes back to our uniqueness. We're all different. So we all grow and learn and work through things at a different rate. And we all have our different tools and medicines that help us get through all that stuff. So it's like, be patient. And the patience comes in because it does get easier, and it does, you do see that growth, but it takes time and patience. And like I said, one day at a time, one thing at a time, don't rush it.
And because we did mention earlier that everything that we have been through, everything is connected, everything is relatable to what you're going through right now, all the thoughts and experiences, which also means just because all of us come from different backgrounds, right? Just because somebody lived on the street versus somebody who lived in the castle does not mean that one person will need more time than the other. They can both equally take just as long than anyone else, right? So it doesn't matter where you come from, and it will be different for you, right? That's why you gotta pay attention to your own body and find how it's trying to speak to you. Pinpoint where it's trying to speak to you, right? Sometimes just finding that spot of where you feel all of that energy, then you can kind of connect with that spot. Let's say it's the shoulder, you connect with that spot, and you ask it questions that you feel like you need to ask, right? And then you will get, sometimes it might feel a little crazy, like, oh my God, I'm just making things up. But no, like think about it. What if you're not making things up? What if it's actually real and it's actually exactly what you needed?
Yeah, it's that message that's being like, hey, listen to me.
Exactly, right? So, and that's where very often it shows up, neglected emotions, feelings, they show up as pain in our body. And we carry it there because we continue to neglect it. And it feels punished. So it kind of punishes us from that spot. I mean, nobody likes to be ignored.
Exactly.
Right? Especially your feelings and emotions, because they're valid. And by you telling them that they're not valid and locking them up is not nice. Because
no, and they come at you fighting. They're like, hey, I'm important too. And then you get all, the imbalances and illnesses and stuff.
Exactly. And all it's asking for is acknowledgement and validation and telling it that it's okay. Like, we'll get through this. And also finding its name, which is naming that emotion or feeling, right? So that way you know exactly who you're talking to. It's not really you, but if that helps, why not? Right?
Yeah.
Some of us believe in fairies. Some of us believe in unicorns. Right? At different levels. Some of us don't believe in anything magical in the world at all, right? Some of us believe in certain things and others don't. And just because you believe it and they don't doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's not true. And same thing goes for everyone, right? So in the end, you're awesome. Own your uniqueness. Um, don't beat yourself up for others' expectations, other people's failures, and other people's views of you or the world, because their views of you are distorted, just like your views of yourself are distorted. But the only person that can ever get that clear vision of themselves is themselves, nobody else. And the way that we can do it is uniting ourselves, our whole self, and continuing to work on ourselves.
Exactly. Growing, learning every day.
Exactly. Right. So thank you, Bethany. And if Meagan is watching or listening to it later, thank you for showing up and joining us. It was so much fun. And until next week.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah. And other than that,
make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell.
Yes, I was like, well, what about the follow me stuff and keep the notifications going so that way you can be the first one to know when these videos are uploaded. Yeah, and seeing all the other stuff that's on my channel.
Yeah, that's all amazing.
Yeah, there's quite a bit in there. So other than that, thank you again, Bethany, and thank you everybody for listening and watching. And until next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.